Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Scots Whay Hae podcast. And this time round, it's our best films of 2025 podcast when I'm joined once again by Chris Ward and Wesley Shearer. Hello, guys.
Hey,
Hey,
Great to see you. And as we do every year, we've each picked five films to talk about, and we'll rotate between us until we are done. Chris, what's your first pick of the year?
going to start off, I think, with a big event in this parish, which is the return of Scotland's probably greatest active filmmaker, Lynne Ramsay, who
Yeah.
doesn't make films that often. This is only her fifth overall since 1999. Even at her most prolific, she's made at most two a decade. So this is her first since You Were Never Really Here, which was made in 2017 and came out here in March 2018. She's still in America, which is, unlike, say, Bill Forsyth or Bill Douglas, are two closest contenders for title of greatest Scottish filmmaker, I think, has spent now the majority of her career out of Scotland. Like, she's only really made one and a half films here, Ratcatcher and the first part of Morven Caller.
Yeah.
Um, and her last three, like We Need to Talk About Kevin, You Were Never Really Here, and now This Die My Love are all set in America. I'd say this one has probably most in common with We Need to Talk About Kevin. It's another kind of portrait of motherhood and mental illness and kind of overwhelm is pretty maximal. She's working with big names again. It
Yeah.
feels like, even though, I think this is now our highest grossing film to date, it's still only made like about $11 million overall. But this is a massive hit in Lynne Ramsay world. She's working with Jennifer Lawrence and Robert Pattinson. It's exec produced by Martin Scorsese. Sissy Spacek and Nick Nolte are in the supporting cast, Lakeith Stanfield. So it's a pretty, starry event for her. But I loved it. I absolutely. I mean, obviously, I'm in the tank for Lynne Ramsay already. But I just, it feels like not really anything else. It's one of those ones that you feel like nobody else could really have made. Like, in the abstract, it sounds a bit like maybe a woman under the influence or something like that. It's this portrait of an isolated woman kind of crumbling, and with the efforts of trying to keep her family together. She has kind of, it's implied postpartum depression that's never really come out and said as much. There's probably other factors playing into it as well. And I was expecting it to be kind of, obviously I knew like it'll be very well put together. I was kind of semi-dreading it because I was like, this sounds like it's going to be really hard going, really enjoyable as well, really
Okay.
funny, just really lush, really beautifully photographed. Just as always with her, like great soundtrack, beautiful visuals. Every shot looks like it could be like a still photograph that's just kind of come to life a little bit. And just, yeah, really great to see her working with some of these massive names. I think like Jennifer Lawrence and Robert Pattinson have great chemistry together. They're two actors who know, well, first, they're movie stars first and foremost. They have that like undeniable charisma, but they are both very accomplished actors too. And it's nice to see Jennifer Lawrence getting a part that she can chew on again. It feels like it's been a while since she's done anything like this. And they have great chemistry together. They've both got that kind of like weird energy to them where, they are big movie stars, but it feels like they'd rather be like scribbling about in the margins and doing character actor stuff. So they do kind of match each other's energy, and they both know how to go big without disrupting like the reality of the film. So yeah, it's just everything works really well together. I can see it being maybe a little much for some tastes because obviously like she it is one of those ones where she just kind of throws every possible effect at the screen to see what sticks. But yeah, I loved it. I had a great time with it. Really glad she's back, and hopefully heralds the start of a more prolific phase. I think I heard that she's already trying to get another film in production, or maybe has even shot it with Joaquin Phoenix and Rooney Mara. So I'm hoping that is already underway. But yeah, a very strong return.
Well, see, I was going to watch this morning just to get it in before we spoke, and I went, "That's no way to watch a Lynne Ramsay film, and
no.
especially not this Lynne Ramsay film or any of them, to be honest." So I haven't seen it yet, but I will definitely see it. One of my favorite directors, and it's great to hear all of those things. It's interesting what you say about the way Lynne Ramsay just makes her films look, and includes that kind of humor and includes that kind of weirdness. The last one, You Were Never Really Here, that was it,
Yeah,
wasn't it?
yeah, yeah.
So again, with Joaquin Phoenix, there were scenes, I particularly remember the one where, people are bleeding out, that were poetic, and there was music going on that was kind of incongruous to what was actually on screen. So I just think nobody really makes films like Lynne Ramsay, right, going right back to Ratcatcher.
Yeah, agreed. And like I think she is as well. She's someone who it's a rare thing where we're able to say, oh, this isn't good by Scottish standards. This is just good by international standards. She is someone who's her films like. compete for the Palme d'Or. You know,
Yeah,
like a
right.
properly internationally acclaimed filmmaker, she is someone that we do kind of need to make a fuss about and make a big deal about while we've got her. And you know, she's here making films. She's
Yeah.
incredible. She is genuinely a world-class talent, and we don't get many of them breaking through here that often. So it is worth, I think, celebrating that.
Have you seen it, Wesley? Managed to?
I haven't. As we said, well established in this podcast, I think a favourite of all of ours. But had not made the trip to see it in the cinema yet. Oh, not yet. I hadn't at the time, so I haven't got round to finding the right moment to sit down and actually watch it because it feels like it's going to be an intense one.
It's interesting going back to the two leads who both made their names in huge franchise movies when they were really, really young. But as you say, Chris, have gone on to do some really interesting and dark work as well. So it's a really interesting pairing.
Yeah, I think that's the case with a lot of those kind of big franchise actors now, though, who came through when they were young. You know, look at Kristen Stewart as well, like Pattinson's co-star in Twilight, who's, you know, amassed an incredible filmography since then. Pattinson himself is just consistently working with, you know, these incredible directors. You know, he's worked with like Cronenberg and James Gray and just all these massively respected names. And yeah, likewise Jennifer Lawrence. Like I feel like they are people who try and put themselves out there. They do kind of use their clout in really productive ways. They work with filmmakers whose work they want to see get made. And yeah, so I'm very much in favor of very much in favor of both of them. And yeah, it was nice to see Nick Nolte back in a kind
Yeah.
of a support, albeit a supporting role. But Nick Nolte's like 85 now. He's really getting up there, and his scenes with Jennifer Lawrence are just really moving in this because a lot of it does play around, you know, mortality and aging and stuff like that. So to see him up there at that age and this kind of, you know, formerly very, you know, like a bulky guy, you know, a big,
Oh
strong
yeah.
looking
Yeah.
guy now, you know, kind of maybe a bit of a shell of his former self and very kind of fragile is, yeah, is very moving.
Uh-huh.
How deep is Nick Nolte's accent now?
You can't hear it without special equipment. They hand it out at the door at the cinema. Yeah, it's like it's one of those old ear trumpet things that you have to put in to be able to pick it up
Just
properly.
vibrations,
Yeah,
vibrations.
Yeah, that's right.
exactly. Yeah.
Fantastic. Wesley, what's your first choice?
Yeah, so my first choice is The Mastermind. So this is also by a director I think I brought up on this, has been on this podcast, mentioned quite a few times, a favourite of mine, Kelly Reichardt. So essentially, the film is the title is a bit tongue in cheek, shall we say? It basically it's called The Mastermind, but follows essentially a directionless sort of New England suburban slacker who's stealing art from or paintings, Arthur Dove paintings to be specific, from this sort of fictional gallery in Massachusetts in the 70s. It has been, that makes it sound like a heist movie. It has been regularly described as an anti-heist movie.
Right.
Um, but for Kelly Reichardt, this is basically Fast and the Furious, to be quite honest. It's probably her most dynamic film yet and very loose, or as loose as she's ever been in terms of her filmmaking style, a little bit, while still keeping that classic, restrained, very methodical, very slow moving style that she's really known for, and also probably disliked for by a lot of people, understandably, but it's something that really works for me. It's very funny as well. It's very amusing. There's got a lot of humor running through it, in a sort of small time, sad sack way. But mainly just like the way I love a lot of her films. I just love how ordinary it all is, really. So Josh O'Connor's the lead in this. Of course he is, because what has he not been in this year? Uh, he's very kind of remarkably unshowy in it, which is great, but it's really the direction and the editing, I think, that sort of brings everything to life. Which another thing that I just really enjoyed about it. I think Kelly Reichardt, she's like a director that I sort of always kind of trust giving myself over completely to how she operates as a filmmaker and just like
Mhm.
allow myself to sit in the stillness of everything. I remember going back to a couple of her older films the first time I watched it. Um, I can't remember if it was First Cow or not. It might have been First Cow. But I remember just sitting through the first 20 minutes and just falling asleep and then like tempted to reach my phone because I was watching at home, which is not a good place to watch a Kelly Reichardt film. And then like trying to watch it again and then just giving myself into that like headspace of no, I need to watch every single thing here. Everything's going to be really subtle. It's going to be really slow moving, and it's really going to hopefully click eventually, and all of our films have done for me, and this was another one of those. Everything's really told through meticulous, sort of lingering kind of camera movements, which is again quite a trademark of hers. But it's also really beautiful to look at. A lot of our older film, or kind of more previous films, have been a lot of them are kind of set in nighttime or set in very, very sparse, kind of desolate landscapes.
Mhm.
This is set in a city and in the suburbs. It's all sort of soft lighting, muted tones, almost kind of smoky. There's like old Marlboro packets lying around, bobble jumpers and bomber jackets. The fashion in it is great. Well, probably great now looking back on it nostalgically. There's sort of a hand cranked rear window in one of the cars.
Oh yes.
Beautiful, sort of jazzy, kind of abstract score that underpins a lot of it. I was actually thinking it would make a really nice pairing with the documentary Jazz on a Summer's Day, just the way they sort of kind of meld into each other, and seem very observational. So yeah, there's just something really hypnotic about it all, and especially just about being able to hear the quiet in all of the rooms that you just don't hear a lot of in cinema now. Um, yeah, it's great. I loved it. Big fan of it, and wish I'd saw it in the cinema, but sadly, just things conspired against me this year, so I had to watch it in my living room on the TV, which is not how I recommend watching a Kelly Reichardt film, because you need to concentrate deeply just to get even pull anything out of it a lot of the time.
Chris, you've seen this film.
Yeah, I love this as well. It's another one of my favorites of the year. Also a big Kelly Reichardt fan, but yeah, just what like Wes was saying, really great score, really looks terrific. It really feels like, I mean, there's so many films that feel like they fetishize that like early 70s period of filmmaking, that kind of Hollywood era of like, Robert Altman and, all the kind of new Hollywood mavericks coming through, Coppola, Scorsese, all this kind of
Yeah.
generation. But this is one that really feels like it could have been made then. Obviously it's set in the early 70s and it feels like it goes beyond pastiche. It really feels like it's absorbed the time period fully and really does feel like a product of that time. It's got that kind of sense of malaise and of like the kind of counterculture dying out at the end of the 60s and the encroachment of Vietnam. And it's really like subtly political as well, I think. Like obviously the focus is like the kind of the failed heist at the middle of it, or well, initially successful and then the fallout from the heist afterwards. But it threads kind of news footage of like Vietnam all the way through on TVs and stuff to the point that you're like, oh, it's just kind of like background detail, but then pulls it all together at the very end in this way that kind of would maybe make you reframe everything you've just seen, and like it becomes like this crucial detail, this crucial part of like what the film's actually doing and what it's about, and this whole idea of someone who thinks that they're able to kind of stand apart from culture and just kind of slip through the cracks and maybe not be part of a society. And when it comes to something like that, it's something that ultimately touches everyone, which not to put too fine a point on it, feels pretty timely right now. Yeah, no, I loved it. Just is, and again, like without, don't want to make it sound dry at all. It's a really enjoyable watch as well. It's a great Josh O'Connor performance. Alana Haim plays his wife in it, from the band Haim, who's
Oh
also
yeah.
in Licorice Pizza and another film that I will probably be talking about imminently. And yeah, it's a really, really enjoyable film. Loads of great character actors as well. Really, really strongly recommend it.
I do like an art heist movie. The original Thomas Crown Affairs are one of my favorite films. So, but you say it's an anti-heist, so maybe
Yeah, I would lower the expectations
Yeah,
of how much time is going to be devoted to the actual heisting of the art.
absolutely.
I
Fair
mean, there's
enough.
like an almost 5 minute scene of him just struggling to lift some paintings that he's stolen up a ladder. Um, so it very much focuses on the sort of, which is what I really enjoyed about it, was that
Yeah.
sort of like, how has this been thought through? How much thought has been put into it? As Chris very rightly said as well, like how they're sort of like operating in that sort of countercultural space, but everything just seems very breezy and laid back in a sort of way that's also quite amusing, and probably is actually one of our most accessible films, I would say,
Okay.
but definitely lowering that expectation on the fast-paced art heist element of it.
Okay. Well, my first choice and probably my favorite film of the year was I Swear, directed by Kirk Jones and starring Maxine Peake, Shirley Henderson, Peter Mullen, and Robert Amell, who, when I saw him on screen, I said, I've seen this guy before. And he's in the Rings of Power TV series. He plays Elrond. He plays an elf, basically. So you couldn't get as far away because he plays John Davidson. Now, for anyone who doesn't know, John Davidson back in the late 80s made the first, he was appeared in a documentary about Tourette syndrome. And it was a huge, it made a huge impact for good and bad, I'll be honest with you. Because you had this young guy, he'd be a teenager. In fact, I think he was still at school when they first started following him. And his, it was the first time I think that we saw Tourette's, certainly in a Scottish context, and I would say in a British context, where he was ticking, but also spitting and swearing. And then they followed that up with a documentary a few years later. I think it was called, so the original was called John's Not Mad. So it gives you the kind of context of that. I think the follow-up was still called John's Still Not Mad, you know, which was how he was doing with work and everything. So the kind of care that, you know, TV makers made towards the subject, or at least as they made the titles of these films, is there to be seen. But so I would have been, I think it came out in 88. So I would have been in my late teens. And everyone was talking about this. It was one of these, and it said, did you see the guy who was swearing, who was spitting on his birthday cake, who was, you know, and there was a sense of kind of something to laugh at, as well as kind of, you know, feel empathy for as well, or even try to understand, I guess, more than empathy. It was trying, well, how is this happening and why is it happening? And, you know, why don't we know more about it? So they've turned John's life into a film, I swear. And they managed to capture all that. They managed to, they bring you to tears, but they show the humour in it. John understands the humour in it. The guy, Robert Armayo, it's based kind of in the Borders, Galashiels, near that area where he lived. He went to live with him or beside him in the same street to kind of really understand what's going on. And it's a powerful performance, but it's powerful performances right across the board. And it goes right back to his early days, because as a child, he didn't have any of this. He was a normal, in inverted commas, kid. He played in the football team. He was a really good goalkeeper. But it starts as a tic, and this guy comes to see him, and that's right, he ticks and swears at his, I don't want to give anything away here. He ticks and swears and gets a beating for it, let's put it that way. So he can't save the ball because his hands are sore from the beating. It very much takes me back in time as well, to the time at school days where that still happened. You know, people still got the belt or the strap or whatever it might be. And from there, it's just heartbreaking. Shirley Henderson's his mother, who's trying to understand, and, you know, who can't have him at the dinner table, and her marriage falls apart because of this. And there's this incredible drama plays out, and every now and again you have to say, oh no, this really happened. This is this guy's real life story. And it's incredible because he overcomes the right thing. He learns, he finds people who support him. He finds Maxine Peake's character as the mother of a friend who has some understanding that something's wrong here, and kind of gets some help and allows him to get help and gets him a job. And to this present day, you know, is living his life. And there are, alongside it, breakthroughs in the treatment of it as well, which he's kind of involved in. That's later on. But yeah, it's an astonishing film. It's an astonishing performance. It's all right across the board. But Robert Armayo as John Davidson, I mean, you couldn't get as far away from a Middle Earth elf, you know, than anything else. Have either of you seen it? No.
Nope. Sorry, I just realized that there's an audio component to this. We're both shaking our heads as if everybody's going to see it.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
a podcast. Yeah, no, I haven't seen it. I think this is another one that fell victim to me. I found this quite often with films this year, where films come and go so quickly now. Like,
Yes, that's true.
I really feel like it's the kind of thing now where, like, you have to see something opening weekend or opening week, and if you don't, then,
Away.
you know,
So
it's
true.
either, it might not be fully away, but it'll be during working hours, or it'll just be at a time that's otherwise inaccessible. I've really found a problem with that this year. I feel like I've kind of
Yeah.
missed quite a few
Well,
big ones this year through that.
I went to see it at the GFT, and I was really glad I saw it in the big screen. Not because it's particularly spectacular, you know, there are no special effects or anything going on here, but the emotion of seeing it on a big screen just kind of comes over, and it's I find it incredibly emotional, but also you know, a real range of emotions as well. And I think for anyone who, like me, remembered John's Not Mad and initially meeting John Davidson, and and finding it, confusing as well as humorous. What are we supposed to think about this? The original documentary was voiced by, and now I can't remember her name, but Eleanor Braun. So you've got a real kind of classically trained actress with this plummy accent, you know, um, narrating this incredible story. The two couldn't be further apart. It's slightly kind of odd to have that. And they show you at the end, there are scenes in it that if you didn't know the story, you would say, well, that didn't happen. That definitely didn't happen. And then he shows you the footage from the real John, and they did happen. And so it actually is great to stay and watch those credits and watch those real footage as well, because it really puts the film and what you've just watched into this greater context. Yeah, I swear, and I really do recommend it. Chris, what's your next choice?
Well, I think I'll go with another longtime favorite of us, the latest Paul Thomas Anderson film, One Battle After Another, which was released this year. His also probably highest profile project to date. And I mean, it's not like he's been working, out
Yeah.
of the spotlight for. He's worked with huge names. He's worked, in Hollywood for the last, 25 years or so. But he was given his biggest budget ever in like this big prestige studio slot. It's I think he got a budget of like over 100 million. He filmed in VistaVision, which is a format that hasn't really been in existence since the early 60s. It was billed as this big theatrical event. It was given a big, almost kind of end of summer blockbuster push. So yeah, it just kind of it's wild to see him operating at this scale, especially given that it's another Thomas Pynchon adaptation. After he made Inherent Vice about a decade ago, it just feels really weird that a Thomas Pynchon book can be the basis for this
Well,
big all-star blockbuster.
Inherent Vice was a decade ago.
Inherent Vice was 2014, it's
Oh
over a
my
decade ago.
God.
Yeah.
Right, okay.
Yeah. So yeah, this one's based more loosely than Inherent Vice was on Vineland, which was Pynchon's own kind of like comeback novel after Gravity's Rainbow. Like he took the best part of 2 decades off after publishing Gravity's Rainbow and came back with this, which again, like we were saying about The Mastermind, is this kind of lament for the end of the 60s and the counterculture as it kind of comes up against the reality of the Reagan years. Um, and I think he's adapted it really smartly because when the details were first coming out about it and who was in it and who was playing which character, I was like, I don't know, this doesn't really sound like Vineland. Like, there's kind of
Yeah.
vague character types here, but I don't think he's actually adapting Vineland, and he is and he isn't. So he's taking kind of the central stock setup, which is, a former revolutionary who has played by Leonardo DiCaprio in this, who's who has like a kind of an enemy from his past resurface, in this case played by Sean Penn, and put his kind of, new identity and new kind of family life at risk. So he's taken that basic setup and updated it to present day, has changed the kind of character names, added some of his own, taken out some of the more eccentric Pynchon details, like one scene potentially taking place on the site of a Godzilla attack. He has kept the ninja nuns, although I don't think they're technically ninjas in this. They are, but they are still like a convent of less than conventional nuns. And yeah, he's made it very keyed into the here and now. But I think to a degree, it's almost misled some people. I think it's very sympathetic to revolutionary politics. The first half hour or so depict like DiCaprio's activities with this group called the French 75, who are a kind of like far left revolutionary group who liberate, concentration camps and go up against, the film's equivalent. It's never specified if it's actually ICE, but the equivalent of, the current like far right groups operating in America. And operating a kind of liberatory agenda and taking down banks and blowing up office buildings and all this kind of stuff, which then starts to splinter when one of their number like kills someone in one of the raids, one of their activities, played by Tiana Taylor, who is also the mother of Leonardo DiCaprio's child in this film. So there's now then after she disappears from the scene, there's a time jump 16 years ahead. The child is now a teenager. And yeah, Sean Penn's character, Colonel Lockjaw, which is a suitably Pinchonian name, even though it wasn't lifted directly from the book, re-emerges and starts to kind of track them down. It becomes this kind of chase film pretty much for the entirety of it. There's a few kind of big set pieces, but it encompasses, there's a kind of underground railroad type situation run by Benicio del Toro, who plays like a martial arts sensei, who is the hands down the character of the year in any film, just an absolute scene stealer every time he's on screen. There's just so much peripheral activity and life to it. There's like again, like a kind of basically like fascist group that operates in the shadows called the Christmas Adventurers, which is populated with like Jim Downey, who is like legendary Saturday Night Live writer and like late night with David Letterman writer. He's part of that. There's a bunch of other character actors you'll probably recognize who operate in the shadows. It's full of all these like absurdist touches, but it really like I think they kind of the fact that it is the rare major studio American film that's actually keyed into what's happening right now on the ground in America has maybe blindsided people and tricked them into arguing over, whether it's appropriately radical or any of this, when really, again, it continues PTA's kind of career-long obsession with, fathers and their relationship to their children. And in this case, it really does just come down to the central relationship of Leonardo DiCaprio and his daughter, played by Chase Infinity, who's a newcomer and is terrific. Um, and yeah, it's moving, it's funny. It is a big, broadly accessible, Hollywood movie, but the kind of miracle of it is that it does still feel like a Paul Thomas Anderson film. It hasn't really sacrificed anything that makes him him. It's just kind of scaled it up. Weirdly, the thing it reminded me of most was almost something like Robert Altman's Popeye, where it's like
Oh, wow.
this is still recognizably you. You haven't really changed anything about your methods. It's just you have somehow been given the keys to the kingdom here and been allowed to do what you do on a scale that is now going to be seen by millions more people. So,
Yeah.
and it's not another instance I think of like we were saying about Jennifer Lawrence and Robert Pattinson with Lynn Ramsey. I think the budget is entirely down to Leonardo DiCaprio starring in it. He is someone who can get a film of that scale made,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
because he's still a box office draw all over the world, so the people know, or the people in charge of funding films know, if you put Leonardo DiCaprio in a film, then people are going to come see it, and so it maybe makes them more inclined to trust
Mm.
directors who would otherwise be a bit more of a risky proposition. So yeah, it's one that like I don't know that is PTA's like absolute best. I would say for like long-term fans, I still probably preferred Inherent Vice overall. Like I like his Joaquin Phoenix films and his Daniel Day-Lewis films. I would still probably put above this. But yeah, it's just incredible that it exists. It's one that it really feels like a miracle that it got made and that it exists in the form that it did that it does. And it was really cool to see it. It actually came out. We were down in London for a wedding the weekend. It came out and got to see it in VistaVision at Leicester Square. They installed VistaVision projectors in like 6 cinemas worldwide, and that was one of them. So got to see it in this format that hasn't really existed since the early '60s. I think the last film that
Wow.
was projected in VistaVision was One-Eyed Jack's, Marlon Brando's
Oh,
directorial
yeah,
debut.
yeah.
So yeah, it was just a real novelty factor to that as well. But yeah, looks great, sounds great, really brilliantly acted. Just yeah, a good time at the movies.
That sounds amazing. And I have to say, I'd forgotten about Popeye. That's a really underrated film, Robert Altman's
Yeah, it's
Popeye.
great. Yeah,
It
Popeye's
really
it.
is, absolutely. Wesley, what's your second choice?
Yeah, so my second choice, I think I'm just looking through my list. I might actually speak about um yeah, because Chris mentioned earlier, I think it's a really important point actually, and it's how I end up getting to this point towards the end of the year where I feel like it's way more difficult to make my top five than it ever used to be doing this podcast. And it's just this really short release window in
Yeah.
cinemas, whether it is, bigger like movies with huge audiences that end up being snapped up by Netflix, or whether it is just the small budget films that just don't really go as far as they kind of should, and you've got a week and a half to watch it, and then it's gone, and then you're waiting 6 7 months for it to drop somewhere to actually catch up on it. So one that sort of kind of surprised me in terms of its longevity beyond that first week. I missed it in its first week and thought I'd never get to see it, and then it's sort of stuck around, at least in the cinemas down here, which was great to see. Was The Ballad of Wallace Island.
Yeah.
Um, as soon as I'd heard it coming out, I wanted to see it. For anyone who doesn't know, it's largely driven by Tim Key and the sort of kind of alternative stand-up comic slash comedy poet slash TV actor. He's been in Alan Partridge's recent TV series and a few other things. He's now in the spin-off of the US Office, which is
Yeah.
like set in a newsroom or something. I've not watched it, but he seems to be getting his flowers just now, which is great. but yeah, I thought that's going to disappear at the cinema in a week and a half, and surprisingly, it was sticking around. Second week, third week, fourth week, there was still some cinemas showing it, which was great to see, and I managed to sneak in a viewing of it, and really enjoyed it. I think the premise of it, it all revolves around sort of a folk music duo, man and woman, who had a relationship. They made music together. There's a super fan who lives on an island, and without spoiling too much where the story goes, essentially he manages to somehow convince this guy to come and play a gig for the island. Um, and it slowly transpires that not many people live on the island beyond Tim Key's character, and it is slightly absurd and quite amusing, but really heartfelt. And I think there's always a danger with these types of films that they'll sort of tip over into kind of mawkish sentimentality. Um, and even more so given all the sort of folk music tinged elements of it that could be really twee, but I don't think it does. It is a bit whimsical, yes, but Tim
Nothing
Key
wrong with
keeps
that.
it all on the right side of sort of charming, I would say, and that kind of low key absurdist humor that he's known for is peppered all the way throughout it. Um, I say it's peppered all the way throughout it. He does then tend to actually start to peel back those layers with like really great sort of character acting, actually, and show this real immense vulnerability to this lead character who you can't quite pin down and you can't really figure out who he is, what his deal is, where he's getting money from to pay for a private gig on an island, what his previous history is, and that sort of slowly unveils itself and kind of merges with the storyline of the folk musicians. Um, and yeah, I mean, I was watching it, and I've seen Tim Key live. He's made me shed a tear many times from laughing. I didn't quite think he was going to make me shed a quiet tear from actual heartfelt emotion. So it was great. It's not flashy at all. It's not
Mhm.
trying to do too much. It kind of is very modest and grounded, I would say. It kind of knows its lane and sticks to it, which I think it's all the better for.
Yeah.
Um, and I think we've been crying out for more of these sort of low budget, um, you know, British independent kind of crowd pleasers. And I think it does it really well. And I was just really happy to see the reaction organically build and build and build for it. And I think it even took them by surprise a little bit. I think it was based on a short film that they made maybe 10, 12
It
years ago,
is,
even longer
yeah,
than
a
that.
long time ago,
Yeah.
the short film, that's right.
So I think it was a passion project, really. And it has done fairly well considering. I mean, very low budget, but yeah, the word of mouth has been great on it. And it seems to be very well received, which is
Yeah.
great. Just a
I,
nice, a
I, I
nice
want,
warming crowd pleaser. Yeah.
I really want to see this film, and I've not had time to do so, but I really like all the people that are involved in it, and I love the premise of it as well. Yeah. Okay, well, my third film actually links into what both of you have just mentioned. It's Frankenstein, Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein, which again was in cinemas for a really short time before it was on. I can't remember whether it was Netflix or Prime, but it was one of them.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's a
Netflix.
Netflix. Yeah.
It's a Netflix, okay. But it was, sold out cinemas, queued round the corner cinemas to get to see this on the big screen, and then they just took it away anyway and stuck it. And so it does seem that this is a big problem because it's a huge film in terms of scale. This is something that Del Toro has been looking to do right from the beginning, I think, is do his Frankenstein story. Was either of you Kronos, was that his debut?
Yeah, Kronos is the first.
Yeah, I remember seeing that and going, "Wow, who is this filmmaker?" And he's had bits of Frankenstein throughout a lot of his films over the years. This version, for me, sticks quite closely to the book. I have had conversations with other people who are big fans of Shelley's book and go, "Oh, well, not really, because this didn't happen." But compared to Nuts and Bolts in the Neck and Boris Karloff or whoever it was that did it, the kind of Hammer versions of Frankenstein. This is right away. It's got Oscar Isaacs as Victor Frankenstein, Jacob Elordi as the monster. Mia Goth, I always like to see Mia Goth's a tremendous screen presence. They've got Lars Mikkelsen, David Bradley. Charles Dance is fantastically evil as the kind of father of Victor Frankenstein. It's all done on a huge scale. It opens on the ice in the a Antarctic, is that right? Arctic. and the ship is stuck, and there's rumor that there's something out on the ice which is less than human, and all of that stuff is in the book. So it was great to see the original story as I think of it on screen, even if it did take a few twists and turns elsewhere, and it looks amazing. The colors, um, right down to the way people are dressed, or the it's lit, or the backdrops, or all of these things. The costume, the now you can see, and you guys know me well enough to know I like a nice thick jumper. The seafarers, the guy on the boats, and their jumpers. I was wanting to go and find out where they got them from. It's just it's beautifully done right across the board, and melodramatic, yes, probably, but it fits this film and it fits this version of it as well. I really enjoyed it, and I saw it on the big screen. I'm so pleased I did, and I don't know if I would watch it on a smaller screen because I want those images in my head writ large. I feel like,
Yeah, again, the theatrical window just done me over. I
yeah,
missed it. Just could not
it was
squeeze it in.
bonkers. It was
And then
absolutely bonkers. I met loads of people at the screening who I know, some of whom I know from other areas. And we were all, I was glad we got seats for this because it's finishing tomorrow night, or this is the last night it's on. It just seems bonkers to me when you're trying to keep cinemas open that you would take the big successes out.
Well, this is the thing. I think like Netflix ultimately aren't interested in keeping cinemas open because
Yeah,
they
I
just want
guess.
people to watch stuff on their service, and that's the danger of this. I went to see. I can't remember why I went to see something at GFT a few weeks ago, and it felt like two-thirds of the trailers had Netflix logos at the start, and it just goes, this is unsustainable. These can't be the only guys who are willing to fund stuff like this, you know? It can just be these like 1, 2 week release windows, and then they just live forever in this kind of digital purgatory,
Yeah,
where people can just stumble across them and have them on in the background while they're doing their ironing or whatever. It's just so, and especially with all this latest attempt of like Netflix to buy over Warner Brothers and all that kind of stuff, it's just like it just feels like things are in a really bad way, for theatrical exhibition. And you're right, it feels completely absurd that they're leaving money on the table like this. People, this isn't going to impact their bottom line in any way. Nobody's subscribing to Netflix just to see the new Noah Baumbach film,
yeah,
you know, but if you say to people, oh, there's a new George Clooney film in cinemas, also Adam Sandler's in it, also Laura Dern's in it, like people will go see that. People miss stuff like that. That's the kind of stuff that could easily have made $100 million 20 years ago. Yeah,
yep,
and has now kind of more or less disappeared. Um, and yeah, like there is still stuff like that getting made, but it's just become more and more difficult for people to see.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Well, we've done two films each, and I think we've done about 45 minutes to do them, so we might have to
So
just
just
speed
pick
it
up
up
the
a little
pace,
bit.
speed it up, yeah.
Guess what's your third choice?
Cool. Well, I'm gonna go for another one that has a couple of Scottish connections, and was my most surprising film of the year, or the one that I most surprisingly loved of the year, which is 28 Years Later, which is soundtracked by Young Fathers.
Yeah,
Uh,
no, can I just say, remember I said I'm going to choose two of two. This is
yeah,
the one, and the reason because I want to talk about this film so much. So great,
yes,
on you
there's
go.
so much to talk about in it. Yeah, and obviously directed by Danny Boyle, who I'm not on the whole a huge fan of. Like I'm very hit and miss with Danny Boyle. Like the early stuff, yeah, like Shallow Grave, Train Spotting, but after that, like oh, I can really take or leave a lot of Danny Boyle.
Right?
Um, but yeah, I think like watching this, I thought as I was watching it, is this Danny Boyle's best ever film? Like I really think it could be in the running for it. I was
Yep.
so surprised because I mean the second sequel to like a nearly 25-year-old zombie movie does not immediately grab you as like this is going to be one of the best things I'll see this year, but there's so much going on with it. I'm also like written by Alex Garland again, who I'm also not a massive fan of. So I think that's where the element of surprise came from. It's like I'm not usually into either of those guys that much, but was so taken with it. It just felt like it had so much to say, and like it was very keyed in again to the moment, kind of like one battle after another. So as the title implies, it's set 28 years after the initial outbreak of the rage virus, which turns people into, they're not really zombies, but effectively zombies, these kind of fast moving killing machines, the infected, yeah, and the kind of last outposts of humanity in the UK. It's a very funny detail that it is entirely confined to the UK. Like the rest of the world is totally fine because they've been able to contain this rage virus just to the mainland Britain. Um, So yeah, the kind of last survivors are in these kind of outcrops of civilization dotted around the country. There's one on Lindisfarne, just off the coast of the northeast of England, and life has kind of reconstructed itself into something, maybe a bit more old-fashioned than people were used to in the early 2000s, but a kind of agrarian village setup where people farm and forage and raise their children in a relatively bucolic setting that is cut off from the infected by a causeway. So it's relatively safe. It's quite heavily fortified, and life can pretty much continue as normal. But one of the kind of coming of age rituals is that young men, when they reach 12 or 13, are
Yeah,
taken out
it's really
hunting on
young, isn't
the
it?
mainland. Yeah, they're taken out hunting on the mainland with their fathers, because there are still supplies there that can be foraged. But the obvious danger is they might encounter zombies, the infected. And it's a kind of bifurcated structure. Again, even just the structure of it is really interesting because it's cleaved almost perfectly down the middle into kind of like a masculine and a feminine half. So in the first half, it's the young boy who goes out with his dad, played by Aaron Taylor Johnson, to forage for supplies on the mainland. Things predictably go wrong. They make it back to the island by the skin of their teeth. And in the second half, he goes back out with his ailing mother, played by Jodie Comer, who is tremendous and obviously a tremendous actor anyway. But she's sick with some kind of chronic illness, which nobody has named to him, but which you can kind of surmise is some form of cancer. And he hears tell of somebody who can heal that, of a doctor who still lives on the mainland, ultimately revealed to be played by Ralph Fiennes. And he determines that he's going to take his mother back to the mainland to try and cure her or find a way to alleviate her suffering. And it's just, yeah, it's just a really interesting way of doing a film like this because it's so kind of subverts what you expect from a zombie film in a lot of ways. But I mean, it plays into it in the sense that, like, the Romero films are always kind of vehicles for commentary about the time in which they were made. And I think there's a lot in it about masculinity, which is very relevant right now. There's a lot in it about how a country constructs myths about itself, and how stories are kind of formed in the immediate aftermath of events that maybe contradict the reality of them. You see, like, when they come back to the island after the initial sally out with Aaron Taylor Johnson, he's like, oh yeah, this happened and he killed this many zombies. And it's like, none of that happened. We just saw
Uh,
it. Like, none of this happened. This is all completely made up. And Danny Boyle does play into that. He intersperses footage of, Henry V as and other kind of bits of archive, like kind of wartime archive. And it really plays into this sense of like constructing a sense of like English national identity, which is also a very hot topic just now, as separate from British identity. What is it that makes England England as opposed to just a part of the UK? Um, it's just got a lot of really fascinating things to say about that. It draws some really fascinating conclusions, but it's also really lovely and elegiac, and it is thrilling, and the zombie stuff is done really well. It's just, yeah, I was so totally surprised by it.
I was absolutely surprised with this. I absolutely loved it as well. It's nuts in places. I
Yes.
mean, absolutely bonkers. The use of the now, who's the poet? The boots, boots, boots.
Oh yeah, is it Wilfred Owen or is
Yeah,
uh,
and over the footage of the war, and if you say of Henry of Laurence Olivier's Henry, and visually it looks stunning. Uh,
yeah, it's all shot on iPhones, which is the other thing. Like, it's
uh,
again, it feels like another kind of step forward for digital. Obviously, like, I always prefer digital to lean into what makes it digital rather than just trying to ape the look of film, and like become its own like aesthetic thing. And yeah, it really looks like nothing else that's been shot on a phone. You
I
know.
mean, you pretty much said it all. I said to the guys, to listeners, beforehand, I had two. I wasn't sure which one to pick, so, and this was one of them. So I'm really pleased you picked it. Can we talk about the Jimmies, or shall we leave that?
It's kind of, well, no, I mean, like, yeah, we can. So, right, the very end, this is a mild spoiler. But if I was making this, I would have ended it 2 minutes before it ended because it has a lovely elegiac ending.
As
Then there's an insane 2 minute sequence where a bunch of another kind of gang of roving, survivors, all dressed as Jimmy Savile, who all have names that are various derivatives of James.
they're all
They're
James.
all wearing like white blonde wigs. They're all in tracksuits. They come in, they do some insane martial arts moves to decapitate zombies. Thrash metal is playing on the soundtrack. And it's basically set up for the sequel because this is now
That's what
planned
it
to be the
does.
first in
Yeah.
another trilogy. And Danny Boyle isn't coming back for the sequel. He's talking about coming back for the third one, but I wouldn't be surprised if he saw that in the script and was like, "Do you know what? Someone else can handle this. Someone else can deal with the ramifications of this moment." And they're bringing in Nia DaCosta, who's American and maybe isn't fully aware of the cultural, or maybe wasn't fully aware of the cultural baggage of Jimmy Savile when she signed up to this. But it's baffling. It's a baffling way to end the film, especially if you don't know that there's a sequel coming.
It's the most astonishing into a film I think I have ever seen, even past, Planet of the Apes or something that's got an incredible ending. It just is like, as Chris says, it's like it's come from a different movie almost. But there are hints at it right at the very beginning when they're watching children's telly. Anyway,
Yeah.
listen, I've just said we have to be quicker, and then I'm babbling away about 28 years later. It's a tremendous film, there's no
Yeah,
doubt.
it's great. Really, really great.
Wesley, your next choice.
Yeah, so I'll quickly talk about Sinners, I think. Quickly because in my mind it's one scene of the film, or two scenes of the film actually, that really stick with me. And I saw it so long ago that I've not rewatched it since. And I'm sure Chris will have some really wise insights into it as well. But yeah, so Sinners was like the sort of big hit of the year, actually, I would say. Very well talked about. Had a decent cinematic release, thankfully, and is definitely one that you want to see on a big screen.
Yeah.
So for anyone who doesn't know it, and I didn't know this going in, it's essentially actually a sort of supernatural horror film, really, with what is later to be revealed as a central cast of vampires, and that's not a spoiler by any stretch of the imagination because you can't find anything online about it without that being the main thing you hear. But having not known that going into it, I was quite shocked at the direction it took, which probably made me enjoy it slightly less than I could have had I known that going in. But anyway, it follows two brothers called Stack and Smoke, I think, and they're returning from. It's set in the sort of like early 20th century, maybe kind of late 20s, early to mid 30s, and they're returning home, or one of them's returning home from Chicago. They're trying to build a life again back in the South in Mississippi, and it's set during that sort of kind of Jim Crow era, where there's like a lot of horrible racial oppression, a lot of tension, and just yeah, it's really interesting, sort of the direction that it takes. Um, the thing that really strikes me about it is that it's got a really deep appreciation and love for music. The central cast in it are really good. I think those twins that I mentioned are actually both played by Michael B. Jordan, which is an interesting dynamic to watch them both. Both the characters have been played by the same person, which has obviously been done quite a few times, but he sells it out and does it really well. Delroy Lindo's in it, who I think we've talked about in this podcast, we're all big fans of. And yeah, there's just really interesting elements of it throughout in terms of like historical elements, some ahistorical, some genuinely historical. But as I said, the music part is really what's really central and really kind of grabbed me. There's this incredible scene in the middle of the film, which is just you need to see it to believe it. Basically, part of the film, the brothers set up a juke joint, and during it, this incredible dynamic scene just sort of opens up in front of your eyes, where it just is basically storytelling through song passed down from one generation to the next, showing sort of the kind of roots of blues music coming from kind of gospel music, that sort of tension between the sort of gospel community and people who are writing and performing blues music, and then all of the sort of music that comes after it, leading its way to hip hop and house music and club music and guitar music, like Prince-esque stuff. Like it's incredible, and it basically just blends all of these incredible musical traditions in a really fresh and authentic way. Like this wasn't some sort of musical supervisor sitting in like a dark room trying to use all analytical tools to figure out what was going to work on TikTok or something. It's just really organic feeling and the type of scene that can only really truly come from like a deep appreciation of music, and how that power of music really connects cultures and provides sanctuary, um, to liberate and create this sort of alternative reality and imagine a better future, even if just for like a moment. And it's just this really hopeful and euphoric moment of cinema, unlike anything I've experienced in quite some time actually, and that's why it stuck out for me. Yes, the rest of the film is great and a lot of parts. There is some moments in the kind of latter half of the film that I feel are a bit more as if kind of Ryan Coogler didn't quite trust the audience a little bit, and it kind of leaned into more of that traditional genre fare. But I still had great fun with it, and yeah, just a real big surprise for me this year, and definitely one that I'd love to watch again if it ever got like a proper big cinema release. Because I know IMAX down here, for example, have been showing it a few months after its original release, and I think it's one to enjoy on the big screen. I think Chris, you enjoyed it as well, didn't you?
Yeah, I love Sinners, and I think it's the kind of film that I've been waiting for Ryan Coogler to make for over a decade at this point. Because like his early films, Fruitvale Station, like the craft is clearly there. It's one of those ones where it's like it's based on real events. It's based on like a real life, murder of a black man by police in America, and it's that way where you're like, oh, is this a bit exploitative? I don't know how I feel about the kind of ticking clock element of this, and we all know how it's going to end. But the craft was there from the beginning. Then he made Creed, which I'm not really a fan of like the Rocky movies, but I watched that and was like, this is great. This is absolutely fantastic. This is a guy who knows exactly how to make a film like this. And then he kind of got sucked up into Marvel. And admittedly, the two that he made were the Black Panther films, and Black Panther is, beyond a doubt one of the better Marvel efforts. But it was that way where you're like, oh, he's made four films and three of them have been like franchise numbers. Is this just going to be him? Is he going to be stuck in franchise hell for life now? And then he hit out with this. He really cashed in his chips and made this big budget original concept film that was a huge hit, and great. That can only be a good thing. But yeah, it's like it's just so confident in what it's doing. There's a lot of complex ideas about history and about music and about kind of race relations, and like even just the fact that like the vampires are Irish and the kind of baggage that carries in terms of like their own treatment in America, and it's just a really fascinating kind of stew of ideas, and it was just really refreshing to see something at that scale like in the mainstream kind of tackle stuff like that. Yeah, really
It's
loved
really
it.
interesting that the last three films we've spoken about could be described as horror. I think horror cinema has always been used to kind of sneak ideas kind of under the radar, if you like, because people look out for the blood or the gore or whatever it might be. But, often they're making strong points. And certainly Sinners and 28 Years Later, I think both sounds as though they both do that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Okay, is it me? I think it is.
It's you.
Yeah.
It's so my next two are actually documentaries, and they're actually football related documentaries. The first is Kenny Dalglish, which is documentary directed by Asif Kapadia, who we know has done Senna, Amy on Amy Winehouse, and one on Diego Maradona. And I was really now I'm going to put cards on the table. Kenny Dalglish was my first and greatest hero, the footballer. It's why I support Liverpool. It's why I kind of fell in love with football, this guy, but not just the football, the way, his whole everything about him, the way he conducted himself, the way he seemed to joy. There was joy playing football and all that stuff. So I was delighted that this was coming out, but I wanted to see how all those Ayrton Senna, a god in his country and a complex character, let's say it. We definitely say that about Amy Winehouse and definitely say that about Diego Maradona. I was really interested to see how Asif Kapadia would make a documentary on someone who, now, there's a lot of the film concentrates on what happened at Hillsborough and how Dalglish took a lot of the pressure of that on his back and how that really almost broke him. You could say it maybe did for a while because he left Liverpool as a manager and he went to, all that stuff. But this is a decent man. Maybe I would say that. This is a kind of humble man in many ways. Could be argued Scotland's greatest footballer. Still, people say Liverpool's greatest footballer, perhaps. So it's interesting to see how you. I think some people may find this not exciting at all unless you're into Liverpool, unless you're into Dalglish or football. But um, it ages ago, I can't remember who it was. It might have been Martin Lewis said, "What we need is more good news on the news." And of course, we know that that doesn't work because bad news sells, unfortunately, right across the board. Well, we need to, look at anything to see that's the case. So it's lovely for me to get to watch a documentary that, in many ways, yes, there's dark times, of course, but it's just kind of uplifting about someone trying to do the right thing every time. Yeah, so I was always going to love this. I was absolutely the target audience for this film, but I did love it as well. And I mean, there's been documentaries about Kenny Dalglish before. but this was, you can tell there's money behind this, you know. So it's not just, and footage that's never been seen before, and interviews that I've never seen before, and I've seen a lot of them. So yeah, an absolute joy for me, a real treat to watch this. And again, I watched it in the cinema. I was determined to watch it in the cinema because to see Kenny Dalglish on the big screen like that and what he did, just a tremendous footballer. Apart from anything else, was great. So yeah, that was my third choice. Are we into the third? We're
Yeah,
going down
yeah.
to fourth.
We've rounded out the thirds.
So let's go to the fourth. Nearly a
Well,
home run.
yeah, I'll stick with like a kind of another documentary of sorts. So it's almost like a combination of the past two because another musical kind of maybe not doc, Pavements by Alex Ross Perry, which is kind of, I mean, I've talked on this podcast before about my long-standing antipathy towards typical musician biopics and how, trying to fit like lives into this kind of standard biopic formula of like rise and fall or whatever with the big celebratory concert at the end, it just doesn't really interest me. And there's been biopics of some of my all-time heroes in the last couple of years, Dylan, Springsteen, that I just have had no interest in seeing because I don't want to see their lives flattened out like that. But this one is about Pavement, another one of my all-time favorite bands. Alex Ross Perry, who made it as kind of like American indie stalwart. He's made, Queen of Earth and Her Smell and The Color Wheel over the past decade, kind of really low budget filmmaking, but it took like a really unique approach to this. So it's a kind of tripartite structure that is intercut all the way through. I mean, you would never expect anything from Pavement to follow a kind of standard biopic procedure, and it really does kind of take their whole attitude of, cocking a snook at the establishment and trying to find their own way to do it. So there's documentary footage documenting their reunion tour in 2022, which is, straightforward enough. There's further documentary footage of so Alex Ross Perry wrote a Pavement jukebox musical called
Okay.
Slanted Enchanted, which ran for I think 2 or 3 nights off Broadway. And there is rehearsal footage of that. There's footage of the actual performance, and there's footage of a museum exhibit, which was kind of a pop-up museum exhibit, which was staged around it as well, full of Pavement memorabilia. So it charts the process of that. And then there's a third strand about an entirely fictional Pavement biopic where Joe Keery, star of Stranger Things, plays Stephen Malkmus. And that footage of that, which seems to be mostly set in the kind of Wowie Zowie era,
Yeah.
is intercut with fake documentary footage of him trying to get into character as Stephen Malkmus, which becomes a total piss take of Austin Butler with Elvis, where he can't shake Stephen Malkmus's accent, he can't lose his vocal fry. Um, so it's again just this kind of like collage like kind of structure of like not following the typical anything that you would expect from a musical biopic, but it still does kind of get to the heart of what makes Pavement great as a band. It is surprisingly emotional when you see, some of the band members like Mark Ibold, the bassist, like sits in the audience for Slanted Enchanted, the musical that they
Yeah,
staged.
yeah.
Seems genuinely delighted by it. And yeah, just some of the people that turn up, they have other musicians like turn up at the museum launch to play some of their songs. Kim Gordon shows up and like Soccer Mommy shows up and just all these other kind of musicians who are like peers and influences, and it really does feel like a celebration of them, even if it comes at it by roundabout means. It really feels like a properly appropriate way to celebrate them, and it's just a completely unique way of handling the biopic as a genre. There's not really, and like, I guess the closest thing I can think of is probably Todd Haynes doing something like I'm Not There for Dylan. But even that, once you get past the fact that it's six different people playing Dylan, it moves more or less in chronological order. This is just kind of like all over the map. But I don't know how it would play to anyone who doesn't have any knowledge of or experience of Pavement, but it's a real treat for people who are fans.
I was good. I've just written down Bruce Springsteen because I know you're a big fan, and I wondered
Yeah.
you had no interest in going to see that at
No,
all.
well, do you know what? The last trailer that was released did get me. I was almost like, oh, do you know what? The second half of that with Atlantic City playing over it, and like Jeremy Strong saying, "In this office, we believe in Bruce Springsteen." I was like, oh, this is really hitting me. But yeah, I couldn't ultimately bring myself to sit there. Maybe when that comes on TV or something like that, maybe I'll put it on in the background. But yeah, yeah, I just do not enjoy
Yeah.
seeing that stuff
Yeah.
play out.
Yeah, I back you up on that. I'm the same. Huge Springsteen fan and just could not bring myself to watch it.
Okay. What's your fourth choice, Wes?
I think my fourth choice, I go for Hard Truths, which feels like a 2024 film maybe because it was on at the London Film Festival. It was getting a lot of hype last year. It got a really, I don't know if it got a late 2024 release in America or early 2025, but I think it was the end of January it came out here. So that is the film from Mike Leigh, the most recent film from Mike Leigh, and it follows. It's actually it's quite an interesting film. It's got that classic Mike Leigh-ness of it all, which is that there is a lot of incredibly funny dialogue and really dark circumstances and quite depressing circumstances. Um, so I think tonally it can be quite surprising to people who haven't seen Mike Leigh films, but um, for Mike Leigh fans, it's probably one of his more straightforward films, so to speak.
Okay.
But essentially, it opens and follows. Follows a black family in London, and the lead character, played by Marianne Jean Baptiste,
Yes.
who has been in one of Mike Leigh's earlier films, and has done lots of stuff since. She is absolutely incredible in this film. The whole supporting cast are generally, to be honest, in a very sort of quiet way. But her character for the first 25 minutes is one of the most abrasive, like seemingly horrible characters you could ever encounter. And it's actually quite oppressive as you're watching it, to be quite honest, because you are thrust into the world where she's cursing out everyone. She's antagonizing every single person that comes into her path, whether it's in the supermarket, whether it's in the car park, whether it's buying a sofa, whether it's her own family, her husband, her son. And yeah, these outbursts do become quite oppressive as you watch it. But there's a point in the film where the tone switches and it starts to become very, very tragic and very quite emotional and quite heavy, with sort of kind of glimmers of light in it. And it is, yeah, it's great. It just and in that moment where things switch and emotions change, it becomes a lot clearer. I say a lot clearer. It becomes slightly clearer as to why maybe she is the way she is, and the sort of generational trauma, the recent trauma, the untreated mental health issues that may or may not be leading to this sort of situation and this type of personality. And you need to really enter it in a sort of judgment-free zone, because I think that's why the film deliberately doesn't reveal all of the trauma, other than her and her sister, who it follows throughout the film as well, whose mother had died 5 to 6 years prior. And there's lots of other elements there that are at play that really make you think as to what the cause of these issues could be, who's responsible for them, who's supporting who, where's the support coming from, really. And I think that there's this sort of, we only ever get a glimpse of that trauma, as I said, but there's a sort of moment in the line in the film that kind of perfectly encapsulates it all, really, which is when her sister just says to her, you know, I may not understand you, but I love you. And I think it perfectly encapsulates that whole concept of the film, which is not having to really always understand someone to support them in the way
Mhm.
that they might need. So that's the sort of warmth that's throughout it, even though it's quite abrasive and quite difficult to watch at times. But it's great. I mean, it's almost weirdly lit, a bit like a daytime TV show, which is quite jarring as well as you're watching it. But it's full of affecting performances. It's like 100 minutes or less,
Right.
and is yeah, just great to see Mike Leigh still
So making a great film.
bringing some great films to
Yeah.
us, in 2025.
It's
Yeah,
Hard Truths, is that the name of it?
yeah,
That's
it's
the
just
one, yeah.
great to see him back as well. It's been like 7 years or something since he last made a film, and at his age, you can't really take a new one for granted. But yeah,
No.
I loved it as well. But it is more difficult, I think, than something like Secrets and Lies. It is, as you're saying, was a much more abrasive experience. But if I can just quote John Waters, who described it as a wretched experience I'll cherish forever, which
Yep.
is a pretty good summation.
Absolutely, that's great. Okay, well, my fourth one is called Make It to Munich. They're directed by Martin Robertson, and so it's a kind of, from the outside, a simple film in a way, but one with an incredible heart and an uplifting story. So Ethan Walker gets a scholarship to play football in America. All seems to be going well, and then he's in a car accident, and a near fatal one. He's lucky to survive it. During his recovery, he makes a friendship with the surgeon, Gordon Mackay, and who used to play football. I think he was on Rangers books. I might be wrong about that, but he certainly was a footballer. But he left behind dreams of football to become a surgeon. And it's Ethan wants to go to the opening game of Euro 24, of the European Championships in Germany in Euro 24, where, if you remember, and many of us have tried to forget it, but we played Germany in the opening game. Scotland, are going to be kind of front centre, if you like. And the film is basically following these guys on bikes as they go from Hampden. They start at Hampden Park and cycle to Munich. And it's really no more than that, except along the way there you get different footballers and different kind of celebrities, supporting them. It's really beautiful filmed. I have to say, a friend of mine, Darren Hersher, was on the camera for a lot of it, helped out. But it was just, it's just a really uplifting story about this, what was almost tragedy, and you could say was tragic because, any dreams of playing football had gone forever. But finding a way to kind of make this a positive, if you can call it a positive, certainly a positive reaction towards it, and seeing someone overcoming odds, and there's lovely friendship, kind of friendship that you only get when you've been through the kind of things that Ethan Walker and Gordon Mackay have been through together. Absolutely fundamental connection. Does he make it? Well, that would be a spoiler for anyone watching, but it's a very simple film. It's on iPlayer. I think it was maybe funded by the BBC. It's definitely, I think there's an hour version. There was a longer version in the cinema. This closed the Glasgow Film Festival this year, this film, and I think they did 3 sold out showings of it. So the shorter version, I think, is on iPlayer right now, and I can really suggest you go and see it. It's it's a really true uplifting story, and again, when good news is thrown on the ground, it's quite nice to just have an uplifting story. We are on to our final choices, chaps. Number 5, Chris.
I'm going to do my standard and run through a few that won't have time to talk about in greater detail. Again, just doing my thing of not taking people for granted, even though they keep making great film after great film. So shout out to Spike Lee, came back this year, Highest to Lowest, Kurosawa remake, really fun. Denzel Washington, first film with him since Inside Man, 2006, really great.
Can I just put a hand up and say Fergus McCready, the jazz
Yes, I was going to mention that as well.
Oh, you were going to mention it.
Yeah. There was an amazing photo of Fergus McCready and his trio in the studio with Spike Lee holding up a Queen's Park scarf, which is not something that I would ever have expected to see before this year. But I'm glad that I did. The David Cronenberg came back as well. The Shrouds, really affecting kind of look at mortality with Vincent Cassel. Feels very highly inspired by his own kind of losses. He's lost his wife and his sister in recent years, and those kind of feed into it. It's really, again, there's so many films that come out now that get described as Cronenbergian, and they feel like they get a big buzz around them. We had The Substance last year, and then it feels like people just completely overlook the actual Cronenberg work that we continue to get, which is still really great and complex and thoughtful, and just there's still no one else like him. Wes Anderson this year as well, The Phoenician Scheme, another great one from him. He continues to make films that no one else could make, and continues to find new ways to do it within what people think of as a standard style. Another incredible Benicio del Toro performance, really man of the year in many ways. And The Ice Tower by Lucille Agilalovich, I can never say her surname first time, Lucille Agilalovich, starring Marion Cotillard. Just beautiful adult fairy tale. If you get a chance to see it, really highly recommended. But the one that I will actually single out for this number 5 slot is my favorite debut film of the year, A Good One, which is directed by India Donaldson, who is, I only found out relatively recently, the daughter of Roger Donaldson, the director of No Way Out and Dante's Peak.
Oh, wow.
But it's a completely different register from her, the majority of her dad's work in the 80s and 90s, which is kind of genre stuff. This is more in line with Kelly Reichardt, actually. I would say it really reminded me a lot of Old Joy, the film she made in the kind of mid 2000s that Will Oldham is in, Bonnie Prince Billy. That one was about kind of two kind of either high school or college friends who reunite in their 30s for a kind of camping weekend. And this one does a similar thing, but now the guys are even older, and one of them brings his teenage daughter along as well, and that kind of adjusts the dynamic as well. It ambles along quite pleasantly for its first two thirds, and then something happens. Not a massive. There's nobody dies or gets hurt or anything like that, but it's just a line of dialogue gets thrown out that completely changes the dynamic of the rest of the film, and it's really fascinatingly done. It's really confidently done. Again, it feels like this perfect miniature. It's only like maybe an hour and a half long. It's got some great performances, no big names in it really. A really striking, I think, also debut performance from Lily Colias, I think is how you pronounce her name. Colias, I'm not entirely sure how her surname's pronounced, as the kind of main, the teenager who comes along for the weekend. Her dad is played by James LaCroix, who's in a bunch of Kelly Reichardt films and some Todd Haynes films as well. He's one of these character actors you'd maybe know if you saw him. But yeah, just really strongly recommend seeking out this really beautifully formed little character piece, Quiet. It really captures how the vibes are always just off on the last day of a sleepover, you know? Just everything feels weird on the Sunday of a weekend away. So yeah, we would really strongly recommend if you get a chance to see it. It bodes well, speaks of promising things from all involved.
Fantastic. I was going to ask you to say the name of the director again, but you had a...
Oh, this one was India Donaldson.
Oh, that's right. So it was
The
the
one I
P.
couldn't pronounce was Lucille Agila. Oh, fucked it. Lucille Agilalovich.
That was
She
my
is
fault,
she
Chris.
is she is Gaspar Noé's partner, director of
Oh, okay.
Irreversible and The Void. I don't know if
Uh,
they're married or not. I don't want to say it would probably be easier for me to say Mrs. Gaspar Noé, but
that's no,
I
no, no. We're
don't
not
want to
going
do
there.
that. Yeah.
Okay,
Um,
Wesley, what's your fifth pick?
So fifth pick for me. Also, that was great, Chris. I love a Chris roundup. It was great.
Me too.
I'm like, oh, all these ones I need to add to my list that I didn't get to see. Yeah. So my fifth pick is. I don't want to say it's my favorite of the year because I think actually Mastermind, Hard Truths probably will end up ranking higher. But something that kind of caught me by surprise at the tail end of this year was Pillion. I'm saying that like confidently. I'm assuming that's how you say it. Pillion. So can't think of any other way to pronounce
No.
it. Um, so this is a debut feature, a debut feature length by a director called Harry Leighton, who I know very little about. And did not do enough research on before before this, but I don't think many people knew much about him. I think he's made a couple of shorts before, but a very interesting sort of assured, compact, uh, great debut. It stars Alexander Skarsgård and Harry Melling in the two central roles. And it is based on a novel called Box Hill by Adam Mars Jones, I think.
Alf Jones, that's
Yeah,
right. Yeah, I know him as a writer, but I knew this film was based on his novel.
yes, not a writer I'm familiar with or a novel I've read. But yeah, so I don't know how true it is to the book. But yeah, the central premise essentially it opens with Harry Melling's character in his local pub, seeming a little bit lost. He is part of a barbershop quartet with his dad and a few other men, and he just seems like he's not in a great place, but just seems quite directionless. Um, and he goes to the bar to order some drinks, and a man in the corner, looking all, deep and surly in some leather biker gear, is Alexander Skarsgård, who approaches the bar. And straight off the bat, you see there's some sort of relationship dynamic here already developing before they even make contact and speak to each other, as a note is passed across the bar. And that materializes as the film goes on as to be a sort of dominant and submissive relationship. So effectively becomes a BDSM relationship that they enter into. Um, the consent part of the film is not explicitly written and shown, but is implied very much so along the kind of early scenes. And it's quite provocative in certain moments. There's a lot of prosthetics on show in certain scenes, shall we say. But it's very human. It's very funny. It's very horny and really heartfelt as well. And it's just a really honest film. I think what is really interesting about it is that it takes sort of great care to avoid. With a lot of these types of films, I mean, like Baby Girl that came out earlier in the year and a lot of other films, they kind of present these kind of relationship dynamics, and kind of mine them for stories and creativity or whatever. And I think this doesn't really do that. It doesn't really like kink shame, so to speak, or blame. It also sort of deconstructs that sort of toxicity that can also happen in cisgendered heterosexual relationship as much as it can happen in a homosexual relationship or in any sort of BDSM relationship. So it's not exclusive to that, but it also follows the sort of tricky situations that these kind of relationships can also arise from when two people have very different ideas of how to deal with that, and how like sort of Harry Mellon's character is trying to find himself and goes on this journey of discovery, and Alexander Skarsgård's character feels very closed off and actually feels like he knows himself a bit too well and isn't really willing to change from that. But there's lots of beautiful moments in it, and I think the kind of relationship that it presents is very difficult to balance tonally, and I think it manages that quite well. Yeah, and there's a lot of kind of really nice subtle nods and lingering moments that establishes that kind of wider respect that it has for that community, and also the LGBTQ community as well. There's a really nice element of the film where real members of what is called the Gay Bikers Motorcycle Club actually feature throughout the film. And they're portrayed a bit differently in the film, I think, from how they are in reality. But yeah, they get some nice little scenes in there in different parts of the film. There's a cameo from Jake Shears from the Scissor Sisters in it, who plays a submissive in one of the relationships in the biker gang. And yeah, it's great. Harry Mellings, obviously, he's very. I've not seen him in too much. I mean, obviously, people will know him from Harry Potter and stuff like that.
Right, okay.
But yeah, he's like kind of runaway star in this. But I always love watching Alexander Skarsgård play these sort of strange characters in the roles that he likes to pick. And yeah, it was great. Really enjoyed it, and very busy cinema for it as well on like a Sunday morning, which was quite interesting.
Wow.
So yeah, would really recommend it. Very short as well. And yeah, great.
There was a band in the early 90s called Gay Bikers on Acid, a kind of grunge band. So
There we go.
So that
Whether
just
there's any
bumped in my
music
mind.
in there, yeah.
And I actually heard Adam Miles Jones being interviewed about it, and apparently he thinks the novel's darker than the film. So
That
maybe they've
probably
kind of,
tracks.
yeah,
There's a
okay.
lot of kind of humor peppered throughout the film. Yeah, I think it kind of needs it as well a little bit.
But
But yeah,
he also said he really enjoyed it. He thinks, I
oh,
really
great.
what they've done with it's
And
great.
slightly, you could also argue slightly an alternative Christmas film if you want to throw it on over the holidays. Maybe not one to watch with the family, but yeah.
Like an alternative Die Hard. Is it a Christmas
Yeah.
film?
There's
Is
a
it?
Christmas tree in it somewhere and some Christmas things get exchanged.
Okay, well, my fifth choice is a little different because it's a short film. I get sent quite a lot of stuff to Scots Whay Hae, particularly with kind of short cinema, to say, do you want to look at this? It might be interesting. So a guy called Ian Forbes, or rather whoever's looking after his PA, got in touch. He's originally from Scotland, East Coast, I think, kind of maybe Aberdeenshire, but he's been living in Norway for years. I mean, since he was a kid, basically. And he's shot this film After Dark in Norway. And usually it's a 10-minute movie. You think there's not a lot going on, but I think this is absolutely brilliant. It's two strangers meet. It's a young man and he's maybe mid-20s to late 20s, and a younger woman. She seems to need help, so he does help her. And just over the 10 minutes, as they move through and then as they reflect back, the whole idea of this relationship changes in really subtle ways. Makes you think about how you would react if you were in that same situation, just as the central character is considering how he reacted, and all the possible scenarios that perhaps could have gone on through people's heads. There's not much action goes on because they go into a cafe and then she wants to charge her phone, and then he makes a decision, and then he reflects on that decision, and that's basically it. But it's a reminder of what can be done in a really short space of time. It looks amazing. It's a snowy night in Norway, and I think it is Oslo, in the kind of centre of Oslo. And yeah, it was one that kind of stayed with me, even though it's a short film. Ian came on the podcast to talk about it. Fascinating to chat to him just about how he got involved in cinema, but about this film and its themes in particular. And it's based on something that really did happen to him. So he's got that kind of insight into it. Yeah, I just absolutely loved it. And I wasn't sure I was going to talk about it, but when Chris picked 20 years later, I went, yeah, okay, let's do that. So it's the podcast still on Scots Whay Hae. People want to go and listen to it. And I think you can find it online now. Certainly in the new year, you will be able to find After Dark and watch it for yourselves and make up your own minds. It's a really interesting bit of short cinema. And that is my final bit. It's by Ian Forbes and it's called After Dark. And that is us for another year, guys. Oh no, well, let's think. Is there anything you want to that's coming up in the next year that you might want to talk about?
Well, if Lynn Ramsay does actually end up making another, I mean, past form suggests she won't, but if she's already underway on her next one, Polaris, I think is the mooted title for it, with Joaquin Phoenix and Rooney Mara, reputedly about a photographer who meets the devil in the Arctic or possibly Antarctic. Don't know, like much like yourself, Alex.
Yeah, I'm not
Can't
sure.
figure out which is which. But out of stuff that is definitely coming out soon, very soon on the horizon, I'm really excited to see Marty Supreme, which is Josh Safdie's first film since Uncut Gems. Obviously, his brother Benny has done a couple of things since then. He made The Smashing Machine this year with The Rock and The Curse with Nathan Fielder on TV. But yeah, this is the first full-length Josh Safdie thing that we've had since Uncut Gems. Really excited for that, and really excited for The Secret Agent, which is a new film by Kleber Mendonça Filho, the Brazilian director, who is maybe my favorite filmmaker to emerge during the 2010s, but he hasn't made a film since, or a narrative film since 2019. Bacurau came out just round about the start of lockdown. So yeah, really, really excited to see that. Wagner Moura stars in it, and I think that's coming out here maybe like February or March time. So
Wesley, have you got anything that you got your eye on? Or is there too much to catch up with from 2025 already?
Oh, put 2025 behind us. Like, bring on 2026. There's so much that came out early in 2025 that I thought was going to be on my end of year list, and sort of missed the mark a little bit for me. So I'm trying not to big it up too much, but there's lots coming out actually. And off the top of my head, I was trying to quickly look at a list I had there and couldn't find it. But there's quite a few coming out that I'm looking forward to. Can't remember exactly what they are, but the most eminent one I think is Sentimental Value, which is Joaquin Trier's new film, and I believe might be released on Boxing Day in the UK. So sort of counting down the days to that. I'm also quite intrigued by Hamnet, not something I would probably normally veer towards, but got a little project to actually read the book over Christmas, and then go into it with fresh eyes in January to see
Oh,
how that translates. So that'll be interesting.
I think we're going to see the directorial debut of James McAvoy in 2026 with
Yeah,
California Scheming.
that's right.
So
Yeah.
I'll be really interested to see how that goes.
yeah, I think that's either opening or closing Glasgow Film Festival this year coming. I think that's been announced so far. So yeah, I think that'll be. I mean, that'll get released beyond that. That's not going to be just a festival title, but yeah, see how that turns out.
Excellent. Well, guys, thanks as ever for taking the time to talk to me about your films of the year. It's always a brilliant chat.
Thank
Thanks
you,
for
Ali.
having us. Yeah. Always
And we will be back in the new year with someone completely different.